This movie is about some text functions, the fundamental text functions, beginning with some text functions that are fairly straightforward, proper, lower, and upper. And following that, we're going to take a look at some text functions that are really helpful when you're dealing with text data, and that is left, right, and mid. And then we'll look at the length function, len, and the trim function, which once again, when you need what these functions do, they're invaluable. So starting with three text functions, proper, lower, and upper, all these text functions are doing is changing the case of the letters in the text string. Beginning with proper, which is great for names, tabbing that into the cell, left-clicking Richard Nixon, Control-Enter. That's exactly what you would want to have happen to the name. It's the first letter of Richard to be capitalized and the first letter of Nixon to be capitalized. The problem with the proper function is it's not very discriminating. I'm going to Control-C and enter it down into the cell below, because in the case of Wizard of Oz, the first letter of each word is capitalized, but you probably wouldn't want to have the word of capitalized in this case. And in the case of Ronald McDonald, Control-C, enter, the first D in McDonald is not capitalized, and you probably would want that to be capitalized. However, with a name like Bill O'Reilly, where there's an apostrophe, proper does the thing that you would want it to do. The O and the R in O'Reilly are capitalized. So going down to lower, tabbing that into the cell, selecting Richard again, Control-Enter. Lower makes every letter in the text string lowercase. Pretty straightforward. Control-C, copying down to the three cells below. And upper, you can probably guess what this is going to do. Selecting Richard one more time, Control-Enter, makes every letter in the text string uppercase. This is not that great for names, but it works out really well if you have product IDs or serial numbers that came in with lowercase, because generally the standard is to have the letters to be uppercase. The next group of text functions come in handy when you're trying to parse out data that's in a text string within a cell. The left function has two arguments. The first argument is the text, or the reference of the cell where the text is. In this case, I'm going to select E5, comma, and the next argument is the number of characters that you want to display beginning from the left side of the text string. I'm going to select 3 and enter, and I get the first 3 characters of the text string. The right function does, which you would probably guess it does, the same thing that the left function does, only it does it on the other side of the text string. So after you select your text string and the number of characters that you want to pull out of the text string beginning on the right side, enter, I get 7, 8, and 9. The mid function is a little different, and it can be confusing for one reason. But let's put one in there, MID, tab, select the text string, comma, and now we need to tell the mid function where we want it to start to find the text string that we want to extract from the larger text string. So I'm going to select the 4th position, comma, and then it wants to know how many characters that we want to pull out from this text string beginning with the 4th position. And I'm going to select 2 and then enter. So the mid function started at the 4th position, which was the number 4, and we wanted it to pull out 2 characters beginning in the 4th position, and that's what it did. It pulled out 4 and 5. And I say it's a little bit confusing because sometimes people confuse the second argument to be the place within the larger text string that you want to end up. In this case, 5 is the 5th character, but if I put 5 as the second argument, enter, the mid function is going to return 5 characters beginning in the 4th position. So why are these valuable? Why do you need to know these? Because there are many times when you get text strings that contain information embedded within the larger text string, like a vehicle identification number, for instance. There's a lot of information that's contained in a vehicle identification number, as you could guess, as long as they are. One of the pieces of information is the year that the car was manufactured. I have an example of a vehicle identification number in cell B15. I have a picture of that same VIN number that's got a schematic showing what each one of those characters represent. And then I have also a list that shows the placement of those characters. For instance, the 10th place in the VIN number is the model year. And since the year, as we all know, is 4 digits, and they only allowed for 1 character space, I also have a list that we can refer to once we get that 10th character, so that we can look up and find out what that character represents in terms of the model year. So what do I need? I need a mid function equal MID tab, selecting my vehicle identification number, the text, comma, starting with the 10th position, comma, and just giving me 1 character, which is the character that's in the 10th position. Enter, that's L. I can refer to this list now, and I know that this car was manufactured in 1990. You can also embed the mid function within a Vlookup and have Excel automatically look up and return the value 1990. We have an entire movie that's dedicated to Vlookups. So that brings us to the length or len function and the trim function. The length function returns a value that equals the number of characters that are in a text string. I'm going to go to cell C14 equal len tab, and I'm going to define the argument for this function to be the text string that's located in B14. It looks like there's nothing in B14, but when I enter, I can see that there's 7 character spaces in B14. And when I select B14 and press F2 to get into the edit mode, the cursor is blinking a distance away from the left edge of the cell. That's because there are 7 character spaces in the cell. So the length function will pick up blank character spaces, and it'll also pick up character spaces that have text in them. Enter. There's 69 character spaces in that sentence, and there's 63 in that sentence. I'm going to copy these 3 cells over to column E, and since they're all relative references, they're referencing the cell to the left, which are currently blank, so I can introduce the trim function. The trim function strips out blank character spaces, referencing cell B14 as the text to satisfy the argument for the trim function. Enter. The length function that's referencing cell D14 tells me there are 0 character spaces. That's because the trim function stripped out those blank character spaces. Control C going down to cell D16, enter. The length function that's referencing cell D16 tells me there are 64 character spaces. There were 69, and that's because I had blank character spaces at the beginning and the end of the text string. So the trim function will strip those out as well. It also strips out, Control C, enter, blank character spaces that are in between the words, leaving you with only 1 blank character space. So we started with 63 character spaces in the text string, and we ended up with 48. So that was an introduction to the fundamental text functions, beginning with proper, lower, and upper, where we can change the case of a text string to either capitalize the first letter of every word, make all of the characters lowercase or uppercase. Then we looked at the left, right, and mid function, where we can pull out of a text string the characters that are either on the left side, the right side, or contained within the text string. Finally, we looked at the len, the length function, and the trim function, where the length function gives us the number of characters within a text string, including blank characters, and the trim function will strip out blank character spaces before and after the text string, and even between the words within a text string.